Spotlight, lectures and performances on and around Albany State University.
This morning I will be singing Donny Hathaway's rendition of Someday We'll All Be Free. Hang on to the world as it spins around. Just don't let the spin get you down. Things are moving fast. Hold on tight and you will last. Keep your self-respect, your manly pride. Get yourself in gear, keep your stride. Never mind your fears, 'cause brighter days will soon be here. Take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Hey, take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Keep on walking tall, hold your head up high. Lay your dreams right up to the sky. Sing your greatest song, and you'll keep going on. Hey, take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Hey, take it from me, someday we'll all be free. Thank you.
Let's give Mr. Matthews another hand for that amazing selection. At this time, we will now have our introduction of the speaker by Ms. Asia L. Cook, Junior Biology major. Immediately following that introduction, we will have the keynote speaker.
Good morning, Dr. Freeman, faculty, staff, students, and guests to the unsinkable Albany State University. My name is Asia Cook, and I have the honor of introducing our distinguished speaker, Ms. Ilyas'a Shabazz. Ms. Shabazz has dedicated her life upon the cornerstones of development, education, strength, success, and achievement. It is because of this foundation that was deeply rooted throughout her childhood, Ms. Shabazz has taken reins to make sure that the rich heritage and legacy of her family would not be defined as a thing of the past. Ms. Shabazz is a world-renowned author, lecturer, mentor, and political activist. She has been a trailblazer in challenging others to believe that knowledge is power, and the courage to have it is detrimental to success. Ms. Shabazz has embraced and cultivated the passion of sharing and capitalizing on the arts and entertainment to encourage the understanding of history, culture, and self-expression. Ms. Shabazz is also a prominent figure in the field of education. She became the assistant coordinator for the Office of Academic Affairs at the City University of New York. While there, she was responsible for numerous training programs that geared towards the pursuit of higher education for inner-city at-risk youth. Her most prized project includes an interactive youth publication titled The Way We Feel. Ms. Shabazz has also received a very respectable level of education. She holds a Master of Science degree in Education and Human Resource Development and a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology. Ms. Shabazz has not only excelled in education, she has also made her mark in government. She has committed her service to the Executive Youth Board for the City of Mount Vernon, New York, and is presently the Director of Arts and Culture. She is the critically acclaimed author of Growing Up X. This novel received various accolades from the BET.com Best Book List, the Essence Magazine Bestseller List, the NAACP Image Award nomination for Outstanding Nonfiction Literary Work, and the United Press International Book of the Week. Ms. Shabazz has never stopped trying to reach the highest goal. Her extensive travels to Africa, the Middle East, Europe, and throughout the United States has shaped her unique way of informing others of the world and the history and culture that lies within it. She has been a true inspiration and influence to the lives of many. Please join me in welcoming the dynamic Ms. Ilyas'a Shabazz.
Biology major? That's great. It really is an honor for me to be here. I call it Albany. I cannot pronounce Albany. I'm not really sure how you all pronounce it, but it's difficult. Someone was trying to teach me how to pronounce it the way I guess it's supposed to be pronounced, but I'm a New Yorker and I can't stop calling it Albany. So please bear with me. But I'm really happy to come here. Anytime I get an invitation to come to the South, to come to any university that has young people in its grasp, I welcome the opportunity. It doesn't matter how far it is. I just think it's extremely important because there's so much history here, and I think it's extremely important that you know your history. I cannot stress it enough. All around the world, people understand their history. Chinese people, they understand their history. Japanese people, they understand their history. Jewish people, they understand their history. Everyone has a history. So history is extremely important. So I believe that every child should have an opportunity to feel good about him or herself. That every child, regardless of race, creed, or gender, should feel safe and secure simply to be. To be beautiful, to be proud, and to be progressively successful. I believe that no matter where we find ourselves in the world, that opportunities to be who we are should be limitless. That most parents, no matter where they exist in the world, want to provide for their children an environment conducive for growth. I've traveled all around the world, and it doesn't matter if it's in Africa, if it's in the Middle East, if it's in Europe, or if it's right here in America, in New York, in California, or in Georgia. Most parents want to ensure that their children are equipped to become healthy citizens. That most parents, no matter their ethnicity, gender, or religion, they want their children to be happy, they want their children to be healthy, to be educated, to be functional human beings prepared to participate in the mainstream economy. And if there are injustices that exist anywhere in the world that prevents one's opportunity to reach his or her highest goal, then we must understand that it is our responsibility to ensure that those goals can be fulfilled. Are you with me? You with me? All right. Oftentimes we complain about our leaders. We complain that our leaders are not doing enough for us, but we must look in the mirror and understand that we are those leaders that we seek. We can't complain what people aren't doing for us. We have to do these things ourselves. We must equip ourselves to be the leaders in our classrooms, to be the leaders on campus, and to be the leaders of our own lives. Are you with me? My parents lived in a world where society dictated whom they'd be, placing man-made obstacles in their paths, making their challenges more difficult. However, they assumed leadership roles and oppose them. In spite of the many obstacles and challenges, Ilyas'a Shabazz, Malcolm X, and Dr. Betty Shabazz opposed them. They sought to provide a safer place for their children and for humanity. You see, much like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X was a selfless man. He was a man of great compassion. He was a man of impeccable integrity. I was just a child, not quite 3 years old, when my father was assassinated, when he was martyred. And so my memories of him, as I recount in my book, Growing Up X, which you don't have, and ordinarily I do a book signing, and I'm told that they will order books for you and they will send them to me in New York and I will sign them and send them back. But my memories of my father, as I recount in my book, Growing Up X, are flickering images because I was so young. There were flickering moments spent with him. And like most children, I was in love with my father. He was Daddy, and our house came alive in a very special way when he came home. He was tall, a little over 6'4", and he had big, pearly teeth that would pierce through an enormously beautiful smile, big, pearly white teeth. I remember his voice with such authority as he'd call my name, Ilyasah. And my mother told me I listened to no one back then. But when Daddy called, I'd stop in my tracks, gooing to give my attention to Daddy. My mother often spoke of my father and our special ritual. In the evenings, I'd wait for him at the front door. He'd come in, wash his hands, pick me up, and hold me in one arm while holding a plate of homemade oatmeal cookies my mother made in the newspaper in another. We go into the den to watch the evening news and share these cookies. So after my father died, we stayed at the home of the Poitiers, Sidney Poitier. How many of you are familiar with Sidney Poitier? You're so young now. So see, it was these kinds of people, Sidney Poitier, Ossie Davis, Ruby Dee. There were so many activists, so many young people who were friends of our family, as also the King family. The King family and the Shabazz family were very, very close. And so I would find my way to the front door after my father passed away and look out the window for him. And my mother couldn't explain death to a toddler. So she began taking a cookie and breaking it in half and leaving it for me on a plate at the door. When my mother first shared this story at one of the Congressional Black Caucus breakfasts in D.C., my girlfriends and I looked at each other surprised. It was a light bulb moment for them because those who knew me would give me cookies or cookie jars for holiday gifts. They knew I had this distinct connection with cookies, and my mother explained why. But as you grow older, young ladies, you come to the realization that a woman's hips can no longer tolerate cookies. And the older women will, I'm sure, agree. So you look for other vices like fruit, exercise, good books, or therapy. Albany State University, freshmen. Is everyone in here mostly freshmen? You all look very young. No? Okay. Well, you look very, very young. I have to say that I'm honored and humbled to be with you this morning for the Dr. Martin Luther King 2012 Convocation Lecture Series. There's a lot of planning that goes into putting these types of events together for the purpose of empowering young people. So I'd like to thank Ms. Deidre Harvey, or we could call it the Ms. Deidre Harvey Organization, for inviting me, and Dr. Melvin Shelton for ensuring this program runs smoothly, and the people on this brother here who sang so well. And yes, please join me in giving all of them a wonderful round of applause. When I made the reservation for the hotel, I asked them would they please make sure that I had a room with a view, and I wanted it up on the the highest floor, because I like to look over and I like to see, I like to see where I am. At home, most people in New York, if you don't live in a house with children and all that, you live in high rise, and so I'm on the 27th floor. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe the 10th floor. So I am on the 5th floor, and it's overlooking, I think, the lot. But at least I get to see the beauty of Albany in Georgia. And I flew hundreds of miles from New York because I want nothing more than to at least stress to you the importance of your history, the importance of your heritage, and the importance of having a healthy identity formation. It is extremely important. I recently read a poll conducted on adolescents who were asked what they would like to be when they grow up. And their answer was quite simple, and I quote, rich. Not rich in service, not rich in helping humankind, but just rich. And it touched me. What happened? What happened to our humanity, to our compassion? Because this sort of preoccupation with material gain only should be unacceptable. January 15th will mark the 83rd birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I believe January 17th will mark the national holiday. Our nation and the world will be reminded of how far we've come since the days of the transatlantic slave trade. The largest forced migration of technically advanced and culturally diverse African men, women, and children who laid the foundations upon which North America, South America, Central America, and the Caribbean now stand. This is your history. This is your heritage. This is your identity. I'm here to plead with you. You see, we have not honored those ancestors properly. We have not honored those African ancestors because we are in denial of an African Holocaust. Most people don't want to talk about it. One is often termed a racist just for having compassion for the African experience, for speaking truth to one's identity. But how are we going to progress as a people and ultimately as a nation if we are not honest about the birthplace of civilization? If we are not honest about Africa's significant contribution to world history and to the history of this great nation from which each one of us benefit today? Some of us say leave slavery in the past. They say that the struggle died with Brother Malcolm, that the struggle died with Dr. King. They say that we all have equal access. We all have our individual freedoms and liberties to make a good living. Look at all the wealthy athletes. Look at all the wealthy actors and musicians. Look at LeBron James. Look at Denzel Washington. Look at Jay-Z, Beyonce, and Kanye West. Look at Oprah. We've been conditioned to think that we are singular, insular individuals who must strive and accomplish alone, that we must pull our individual selves up by our own bootstraps. But if we take an honest look around, we must admit it isn't working. Brother Malcolm helped us to understand the importance of that African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. He helped us to understand that we must stand for something or simply get out the way. We saw the young people on Wall Street, the young people in Tunisia, the young people in Egypt, and all across the borders take a stand for justice. They took a stand for something that they believed in other than material gain, other than simply themselves. We see the young people who understand that the struggle is far from over. Those of us present this morning, we understand that the struggle is not over. How can the struggle be over when 60% of Black and Latino young men are shackled within the confines of jails and prisons throughout this country? 60%. How can the movement be over when so many of our babies are giving birth to babies without a clue as to what it takes to raise a healthy, happy, functional child with properly formed identity intact? How can the movement be over when our young people are dropping out of high school in record numbers and far too many of them attending low-quality schools with too few books and not enough computers? How can the movement be over with so many of us who cannot find work, who cannot afford decent housing, who cannot support our families? Fathers gone, children disrespecting elders, mothers trying to be both parents. How can any of us think that the movement is over? We come from a very powerful heritage. By a show of hands, how many of you have heard of the Jewish Holocaust? My father often spoke about the parallel oppression of contemporary European Jews. He said Jewish people never lost pride in being Jewish. They knew they made a significant contribution to history, despite the horrific crime committed against their humanity. However, they vow never to forget. They teach their own children at a young age about the Jewish Holocaust, and evidently you've learned about it too. They teach their children about their history and their culture. Their identity is intact. They vow never to forget who they are, and they ensure that the entire world knows as well, and they are still getting reparations from Germany. But we cannot say the same about the Holocaust of people of African ancestry who were stripped of everything necessary for a healthy identity formation, with our connectedness to the human family erased. So I'm going to provide some historical facts for you. And I want you to put a face on the many millions of individuals, because most of these African men, women, and children were your ancestors. The transatlantic slave trade was the largest forced migration of people in the history of the world. The largest forced migration of a people in the history of the world. More than 20 million healthy, not starving, hungry people and, the spears and everything, healthy, skilled men, women, and children were deported from Africa to be enslaved in the Americas. Because remember, you cannot do anything with an African person who's not healthy and who's not skilled. More than 5 million healthy and skilled African men, women, and children died during the voyage. More than 15 million African men, women, and children reached destinations that spanned from the Caribbean, all the countries of South and Central America, Mexico, and the United States. From the years 1492 to 1820, 4 persons out of 5 who reached the New World were African men, women, and children, compared to only 1 who was European. So what does this study say? It says that most of us have a person of African heritage in our family tree, because oftentimes, we say, oh, I'm Irish, oh, I'm this, I'm that, and we forget all about the African person that, clearly we, resemble. It says that African people laid the foundation for most parts of the world. Healthy and skilled African people, not starving. It says that with so many millions of the greatest healthy and skilled African people who were removed from the continent, that it's only inevitable that the infrastructure would collapse. I heard a professor compare the transatlantic slave trade to the equivalency of a 9/11 occurring once a week for all of those years that passed. That was the devastation by removing so many millions of healthy and skilled African men, women, and children. People often ask me what it's like to be the daughter of Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz. I was raised proud to be of African ancestry, proud to be a Muslim, and proud to be a woman. My father often said, when you teach a man, you teach a community. When you teach a woman, you raise a nation. And I'm sure at least all of the women in here would agree with him, wouldn't you? I recall watching my mother's efforts working in the cause of human rights and empowering women in particular. I remember my mother participating in the international conference for women that was held in Beijing, China, shortly before she passed away. And writing my book, Growing Up X, afforded me an opportunity to reflect on her life as a source of inspiration and empowerment. My mother was just a young woman in her 20s, just a few years older than many of you young women here, when she witnessed the assassination of her husband. 1 week prior, on Valentine's Day, a Molotov cocktail was thrown into the nursery of her home, where my sisters and I slept as babies. When my father was killed, my mother was left traumatized, frightened, and alone. She was a young woman with 4 babies and pregnant with my youngest twin sisters. Now, by a show of hands, how many of you here have at least 6 babies? Let me see. Okay. So you see, there are no excuses. There are no excuses. I've often asked myself, with 6 babies, widowed, and the wife of Malcolm X, the wife of a young man who challenged a government that had been historically unjust to its own people, how was this young woman, Ilyas'a Shabazz, able to overcome such obstacles and still raise her 6 daughters and still dedicate her life to giving back to others and still earn a PhD? How? She never accepted no or I can't as an answer. My mother survived because of her faith in God and because she knew the importance of self-respect, self-esteem, and the understanding of history to empower her. She raised 6 daughters with the knowledge of true history as a means to develop our healthy identity and with an understanding of our obligation to others. My father, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, Malcolm X, was a man only in his 20s when he burst onto the scene of the human rights struggle. He was only a few years older than many of you here. Now, let's put the time in proper context so that when we see Malcolm X and other activists, we understand that these leaders were not hostile. On the contrary, they were compassionate, responsible young adults. That these heroes, these world-renowned leaders, were reacting to a very hostile environment. They were reacting to injustice. Malcolm X, just in his 20s, campaigned for every breathing human being. He campaigned against institutional racism because he saw himself in you. The years 1955 to 1965 marked the height of the civil rights movement. A 14-year-old African-American boy named Emmett Till was viciously attacked and beaten, younger than you, viciously attacked and beaten to death by adult white men who didn't understand history. They didn't understand true brotherhood. They didn't understand the concept of humanity, freedom, justice, and liberty for all. 4 little girls were killed in a church bombing. Medgar Evers was gunned down. Miss Fannie Lou Hamer was a civil rights activist, just a young woman who was savagely beaten with an iron billy club. This beating was ordered by a local sheriff. She later wrote of her body going numb, and that during this particular beating, because there were so many others, that her dress was rising, revealing her undergarments, and that when she mustered up enough strength to pull her dress down, the sheriff pulled her entire dress above her head as the beating continued. And yet she continued. She still went and stood up against injustice. Goodwin, Schwirmer, and Cheney fought against injustice, and these 3 young men, 2 blacks and 1 white, were killed by white supremacists. Billie Holiday's song, Strange Fruit, filtered the airwaves. Strange fruit blowing in the wind. The strange fruit to which she referred were hundreds of lynched African-American corpses dangling on tree limbs throughout the South, blowing in the wind. Public lynching were turned picnics where gangs of supremacist groups terrorized helpless young men and women as their children watched the trauma and torture of their black fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters, feeling shamed of their African identity, as if their lives were worthless. And government officials unleashed fire hoses and dogs on peaceful, nonviolent, unarmed, protesting citizens. Malcolm X was only in his 20s when he joined the civil rights movement. He campaigned for every breathing human being. He campaigned against institutional racism. he challenged a government that continued political violence against its own citizens. And in the 12 short years preceding his death, Malcolm X rose to the defense of African Americans brutalized by discrimination. He challenged white supremacy and racial injustice. He redefined the American civil rights movement to include a human rights agenda, and he worked tirelessly to unite Africa and the diaspora towards a singular international struggle for freedom and independence, so that we understood that we are from Africa, that we were not from Negro land, because remember we were called Negroes. We were not from color land because we were called colored. We were not from black land, but that we were from Africa. And so he united that. He accepted the mantle of leadership in the human rights struggle because he understood the oneness of humanity, that we are all brothers and sisters in the family of God. He awakened us with information of our heritage, with information to provide us with a healthy identity as persons of African ancestry as we navigated through the challenges of institutional racism. It is extremely important that you understand this. And if there's anything that you don't understand, that you go and you get books and you learn about your history. He awakened us with information that helped to form a healthy identity, that African Americans were not simply descendants of slaves, but that we were enslaved African people in bondage. That our history did not begin in slavery, but that our ancestors, healthy and skilled African men and women, as architects of great civilizations, resurrected monuments. They built those phenomenal pyramids, those phenomenal cities and ships that architects are continuing to uncover today. That these healthy and skilled African men and women were priests. They were multilinguists. They were scientists, physicists, astrologists, warriors, farmers, musicians, dancers, and artists. He restored our identity and helped us to know that long before there was a Harvard or a Yale, for example, there was the University of Timbuktu, where black African scholars conferred degrees to citizens of the world. It is the place where the first magnificent libraries were erected. It was the place where healthy and skilled African scholars conferred degrees to people of the world. Thriving civilizations with magnificent cities, universities, monuments, obelisks, 78-foot high granite structures weighing in excess of 200 tons. Now they even have high structures thousands and thousands of years ago, and we can't find one here in Albany, Georgia. So that just goes to show you, not anything against the great people of this place, but it means that we have a lot of work to do. And as you know, I was a consultant, so you guys have my old bio, but I've done so much. That bio is maybe about 10 years old, but I've done so much since. I'm a consultant for a documentary, PBS award-winning film, Prince Among Slaves, which is really is excellent. There are some things that weren't that good in it, but for the most part, it was great because Prince Abdul Rahman was one of the most famous, and I also have a children's book that's coming out 2013 that I finished 2 years ago, and I have a young adult book for you all that will be coming out in 2013 as well. But Prince Abdul Rahman, it's a true story, one of the most famous Africans captured in the 1700s, and he recounted his observation of this new land. He was stolen from the area of Timbuktu. He was the prince of that whole region before they cut it up and made it into Mali and all these different small countries, but it was a large landmass. They called Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Lower Egypt was the top of what we know Egypt today, and Upper Egypt was down near Sudan. So it was this whole great landmass. And so he recounted his observation in the 1700s. We get a perspective from an African person who was brought to the Americas, and he said that the U.S. and specifically North Carolina was by no means comparable to the lands in Africa where he was kidnapped. In the 1700s, this great prince, a real prince, you know, with gold and all that stuff, not the feathers and all this stuff that they show when they show African kings. You know, we usually see these people swinging through, you know, branches and stuff, but a real full-fledged prince who spoke, you know, many languages and you know, they had all these great structures. but that this great prince indicated that the U.S. was underdeveloped, that it was a pagan society, that the homes were poorly constructed by comparison to the structures they built in Africa. He said that most Africans spoke 5 to 7 languages. It was a broad culture based upon universal spirit and intellect. That means God of some sort and intellect, being progressive and productive. God in education, God in scholarship, universal spirit and intellect, and that these African people were brought to the New World to replicate the thriving civilizations from whence they came. I pray that we will be fortified with the understanding that knowledge of accurate historical information prepares us for leadership in our homes. It prepares us for leadership in our communities and around the world. It enforces self-respect and then respect for others, and I hope that the brothers and sisters can get it right and they can have great relationships. We must ensure that when history is taught, it includes the full contribution of all with integrity and honesty. Accurate historical facts lead to a clear understanding that we cannot suppress another without subjugating ourselves, that we cannot come to the aid of another without helping ourselves. We do this willingly. I could not tell you in 10 or 100 hours all the contribution this great land of blacks made to the United States, to South America, to Asia, to Europe, and to the world, but I can tell you, if you are an African of the diaspora and you do not know the greatness of your heritage, then your education is terribly incomplete, and you and all the children following will continue to suffer this malady of detachment. Detachment, separation from history, not understanding your history, not even thinking that it matters. Disconnection from culture, rejection of heritage, and very likely a life without true passion, determination, and purpose. Standing for nothing, falling for anything. Thinking the struggle for freedom, equality, and justice ended in 1863 or 1865 with the Emancipation Proclamation. Thinking that opportunities for advancement are for self-improvement and self-gratification. Falling for the concept of the me generation when in fact any opportunity for advancement should be for the benefit of society and humanity as a whole. Dr. John Henry Clark said in the 1950s that the real war black people are in the 1950s is to see who will control the minds and thinking of black children. And so today, 60 years later, the study of the dolls, the black doll and the white doll, you all remember, was repeated, and the results were not only the same, they were worse. You remember the black doll and the white doll, right? You all know about that case study. Who doesn't know about that case study? There was a black doll, there was a white doll, and they were shown to little babies, children. And this just goes to show you institutional racism is real. And all of the babies, the dolls were identical. The only difference is that one doll was brown, the other doll was pink. And all of the children picked the pink doll because they said that doll was beautiful and happy and everything great. And they rejected the black doll because they said that doll was dirty, ugly, bad, mean. And so it is a reflection of how these children see themselves. And then these children grow up, and then they call themselves the H word, the B word, the N word as terms of endearment. And so we see that it has something worked. So we have to understand the importance of our history so we can counter all that stuff. Tupac Shakur raised the issue on his multi-platinum single, Keep Your Head Up, when he proclaimed, you'll have a race of babies who hate the ladies that make the babies. Because right now, black women, I tell you, we need to help our brothers put us back up on the pedestal. Because we have to hold women up in high esteem because women are the ones who nourish the children. So we have to treat our women right. If we're not treating our women right, then the woman's going to be just mad. And she's going to raise some children and, and all kinds of things are going to happen. So I am challenging you to understand that if you don't know your history, your detachment will only allow you to focus on material possessions, the bling, rather than having pride in yourselves as the authentic jewel that you are. It is imperative, young men and women, that you know your history and that you are scholars who will ensure to publish history accurately. As future leaders studying here at Albany, is that how it goes? Albany? As future leaders studying here at Albany State University, when you are studying, please do not only memorize text. I cannot emphasize it enough. Or simply take classes just so you can graduate. If your goal is to be a doctor, you should not study medicine just for social status. Rather, become a doctor to ensure that disadvantaged people will have adequate medical attention. Whatever your job is going to be, it should be to help others. And then you get all these great blessings and your life feels meaningful. If your goal is to be an attorney, you should not study law just to buy a bigger home or a shinier car. Rather, you will become a lawyer so that you can fight all forms of injustice because there's so much of it going on. And if you're committed to social justice, then whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, an artist, musician, politician, or teacher, your purpose and your service will be to improve upon and give back to society. It is extremely important. Keep your eyes on the prize. Take full advantage, as you will never, ever, ever get these years back. And any person in here with a little bit of gray in the roots will tell you that. I am asking you today, when you look around, what do you see? If you see injustice, inequality, and a lack of freedom anywhere, then understand the struggle is not over. Look around you. If you are willing to stand for something, commit yourself to giving back. If you are willing to answer the call to leadership, study, give it 110%, because that's the kind of people that you come from. That is your legacy. Prepare yourselves so that you can fulfill your life's purpose. Commit yourself to building strong, safe, and self-respecting communities. Then you will demonstrate to the world that you too are the sons and daughters of promise. And you will stand tall with the administrators and faculty here at Albany State University who are preparing you to take your place in history, to take your place in the ongoing struggle for justice. You will stand worthy to honor the Queen of Sheba, Queen Hatshepsut, Cleopatra, Ramses, and Menelik. You will stand worthy to honor the Congolese Queen Nzinga, who was the greatest military strategist in the year of the 1600s that ever confronted the armed forces of Portugal against Angola. Her aim was the total destruction of the slave trade. Let us stand to honor those who lived a purpose-driven life, all of whom gave to humanity, who contributed to history, because that is the meaning of life, to contribute something. We will stand together, worthy to say thank you to Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Stephen Biko, Nelson and Winnie Mandela. We will stand together, worthy to honor Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, African revolutionary generals and their African brothers and sisters in bondage who took a stance in the 1800s and overthrew their French oppressors and claimed their freedom and land in Haiti. We will stand together here in the U.S. to honor Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, Denmark Vesey, Nat Turner, David Walker, Harriet Tubman, Fannie Lou Hamer, all of whom fought against injustice. We will stand worthy with the great historians, Carter G. Woodson, John Henrik Clark, Doc Sheikh Anta Diop, and J.A. Rogers. Let us stand worthy and honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Sister Coretta Scott King, Malcolm X, and Dr. Betty Shabazz. Let us stand worthy to honor and understand the works of all of these freedom fighters. And as we pay tribute, may each one of us emulate Dr. King's wisdom, courage, commitment, purpose, responsibility, and selfless sacrifice to truly create a better world for ourselves, as well as for generations yet to come. And in that manner, your blessings, I promise, will continue forever. Thank you.